Elaine Stafford shattered my heart before she ever violated federal law. You don't trample a man's family heritage and then expect kindness in return. She stood in my driveway that morning, designer heels ticking against gravel that had been there long before her subdivision was even a concept, waving a $2,500 hunting violation like it was a winning lottery ticket on land my grandfather had carved out back in 1952. This woman had the nerve to tell me that a 70-year-old family tradition didn't fit with modern community standards, while her phony HOA had been skimming from the neighbors for 4 years straight. What Elaine didn't realize, what none of these suburban dictators ever understand, is that some of us actually bother to read the fine print, and her carefully curated little kingdom was built on lies that couldn't survive even a basic legal challenge. By the time I was through with her, Elaine Stafford was going to learn the difference between actual authority and the kind of fake power you get from bullying families with clipboards and plastic smiles. Drop a comment and tell me where you're tuning in from, because you're about to see exactly what happens when a California real estate hustler starts a fight with 3 generations of Colorado stubbornness. Let me rewind and explain how this whole mess kicked off. My name is Lucas Carter, and I'm what you'd call Colorado born and bred. 3rd-generation ranch kid, though these days I earn my paycheck running heavy equipment for the county. It's not glamorous, but it covers the bills and keeps my hands honest. The land, all 40 acres of it, came to me when Granddad passed 2 years back. 40 acres of pure Colorado paradise, complete with an old hunting cabin, a weather-beaten barn that's seen better decades, and pasture that rolls in green swells toward the mountains. The cabin itself isn't anything fancy, just aged pine logs and a stone chimney that's probably being held together more by stubborn will than by mortar at this point. But here's the thing about that cabin. It's soaked in history. The walls are lined with faded pictures of 3 generations of Carter men standing next to their deer. Granddad in his Army surplus jacket, my dad rocking those 70s sideburns, and me, a skinny teenager holding up my first buck. The wind whistling through the old gaps in the logs sounds like voices from long ago. I swear the place still carries the scent of the pipe tobacco Granddad used to smoke on cold November mornings. My boy Noah, he's 16 now, comes out every other weekend. Kid's got more tech know-how in his pinky than I've managed in my whole life. But put a rifle in his hands and he's pure Carter. The divorce wasn't easy on either of us, but this land, this is where we reconnect, where we remember who we are now. Pine Ridge Estates. That's the subdivision that sprang up around my property like mushrooms after a storm. Built in 2018, 47 copy-paste houses ranging from $450,000 to $650,000. Most of the folks there are decent enough. They commute into town, keep their yards trimmed, give a wave when they drive by, live and let live, that kind of thing. But then there's Elaine Stafford. Elaine moved out here from California about 6 years ago and bought the biggest house in the development. One of those modern, boxy monstrosities that looks like someone took a cardboard cube and painted it beige. She's 52, works in real estate, and has been HOA board president for 8 years straight. She's always in those quilted vests that practically shout, "I shop at places with names like Countryside Manor." And her manicured nails are forever tapping on clipboards like she's conducting some invisible orchestra of neighborhood obedience. Everything is about elevating property values and modernizing the community. Translation: making everything look like a catalog spread, even if it means steamrolling anything with actual character. I should have recognized the warning signs when she showed up for her welcome to the neighborhood visit. 3 months after I inherited the place, she stood in my driveway, her overpowering perfume clashing with the honest smells of hay and motor oil drifting from my workshop, surveying my land like a general planning an invasion. "That cabin is really dragging down everyone's property values," she said, not even bothering with small talk. "Ma'am," I answered, keeping my tone even, "my cabin was here before your subdivision was even a glimmer in some developer's eye." Her smile never reached her eyes. "Well, we'll see about that. The HOA has certain standards to uphold." She paused, letting that sentence hang in the air like exhaust from a misfiring engine. "I'm sure a reasonable man like you understands the importance of community harmony." Community harmony, right? What she meant was conformity. What she meant was control. as I watched her click-clack back down my gravel driveway in those ridiculous heels. I had no idea she was already plotting her first move. Had no clue that, in her mind, my 40 acres weren't a family legacy. To her, they were just another asset to be managed, dominated, and eventually absorbed. I was about to find out real fast that Elaine Stafford didn't just want to polish up property values. She wanted to own them. Elaine's opening volley landed 2 weeks later, delivered with all the ceremony of a formal declaration of war. Official HOA letterhead, legal size envelope, the whole 9 yards. I tore it open right there by the mailbox, and I swear I could almost feel her smug satisfaction crackling off the paper like static. "Dear Mr. Carter," it began, "after careful review, the Pine Ridge Estates Homeowners Association has determined that the structure commonly referred to as your hunting cabin constitutes a non-conforming architectural violation under Section 4.7 of our community covenants. Non-conforming architectural violation, fancy $20 words for we don't like your cabin. The letter went on to demand I remove the cabin within 30 days, with fines of $100 per day kicking in immediately." At the bottom, Elaine's signature swooped across the page like a vulture circling roadkill. The kicker was a little footnote that read, "All properties within Pine Ridge Estates must maintain aesthetic harmony consistent with modern residential standards." I'll admit it, for about 30 seconds I saw red. Then I did what Granddad always taught me. When somebody tries to buffalo you, you better know the lay of the land. So that Saturday, Noah and I headed down to the county courthouse. Nothing clears your head like the squeak of microfiche machines and the shuffle of old property records. Noah, bless him, actually thought it was cool. "Dad," he said, pushing his glasses up as he scrolled through decades-old survey maps, "this is like being a detective, but for land." What we uncovered was pure gold, legal gold. My property had never, and I mean never, been included in the HOA's jurisdiction. The original boundary surveys showed, clear as day, that Granddad's land was specifically carved out of the development agreement. But here's where it got interesting. There was a note from 2019 about a proposed boundary adjustment that had been approved at an HOA meeting. That's when I paid a visit to Mrs. Green, the sweet older lady in the original house on the corner of Pine and Meadow. She'd lived there since the first homes went up, and she had a memory like an elephant with a filing system to match. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, handing me a mug of coffee strong enough to strip paint. Elaine shoved that boundary change through when half the neighborhood was off on summer vacation. Said it was just a technical correction to include properties that had been accidentally left out. She wiggled her arthritis-twisted fingers in the air to make quotes. Most folks didn't even know what they were voting for. Armed with that intel, I decided to show up at the next HOA meeting. Noah came along, phone at the ready, because he said, and I quote, "Dad, if this lady's as wild as she sounds, somebody's got to get it on video." The meeting took place in Elaine's living room, which should have been my first warning. Picture 20 people crammed into a space meant for fancy dinner parties. Everyone perched on those cheap metal folding chairs that screech every time you shift your weight. Elaine presided from her spot like some suburban queen holding court. When they opened the floor for new business, I stood up and calmly asked to speak on the boundary issue. I spread the original survey maps across her glass coffee table, the pages crinkling against the surface. "These documents clearly show my property has never been under HOA jurisdiction," I said, keeping my tone steady and reasonable. "I'd like to know what legal authority you're claiming over land that existed long before the subdivision." Elaine's answer dripped with pure, dismissive arrogance. "Mr. Carter, those old documents are irrelevant. We have updated community standards that apply to everyone in our neighborhood." She flicked her hand like she was shooing away a fly. "I'm sure you understand, we can't make exceptions just because someone insists their property is special." That's where I slipped up. I should have just smiled and walked out. Instead, I pushed back. "Show me the legal document that gives you authority over my land." Elaine's fake smile faltered for a split second, and I caught a glimpse of something cold and calculating underneath. "Mr. Carter, I think you'll find we're prepared to pursue all legal remedies necessary to preserve our community standards." The room fell silent. Even Noah looked up from his phone, feeling the tension settle over everyone. "Is that a threat?" I asked. "It's a promise," she replied, that fake smile sliding back into place like a mask snapping on. That's when she dropped her first real bomb. She'd already filed complaints with county code enforcement, claiming my hunting created noise pollution and safety hazards. She produced a petition supposedly signed by worried neighbors, though I recognized only 5 signatures out of 47 houses. Her ultimatum couldn't have been clearer. Stop all hunting activities immediately or face escalating enforcement. As Noah and I walked out of that meeting, his phone recording Elaine's smug expression as we left, one thing became painfully obvious. This wasn't about property values or community standards. This was about power. And Elaine Stafford had just made the mistake of trying to wield hers against the wrong man. Elaine didn't waste any time making good on her threats. Within a week, I had county code enforcement on my doorstep, clipboards in hand, and disapproving looks on their faces. Turned out Elaine had friends at City Hall. Her real estate outfit had supposedly helped a few bureaucrats snag their dream houses at suspiciously generous discounts. The violations they listed were nothing if not imaginative. Alleged septic issues with the cabin system that had been working just fine for 70 years. Claims of unsafe hunting practices even though I'd never drawn so much as a warning from state wildlife officers. Anonymous complaints about noise disturbances at the exact times I happened to be out hunting. But Elaine's real masterstroke was her neighborhood flyer campaign, something straight out of a propaganda textbook. Every mailbox in Pine Ridge Estates got a glossy handout titled, "Protecting Our Property Values, the Hidden Costs of Non-Conforming Land Use," complete with stock photos of nervous-looking suburban families and bullet points about how clashing activities could cost homeowners thousands in lost equity. Then came the sabotage. I walked out to my truck on opening morning of the season and found all 4 tires slashed. Clean cuts, professional work. Had to be someone with the right tools and the stomach for vandalism. While I was on the phone with roadside assistance, Noah stumbled onto something even more infuriating. Freshly posted no hunting signs lined my property boundary, complete with official-looking references to municipal ordinances. The crisp crack of my boots on the frosty ground as I ripped those signs out of my dirt sounded like gunshots in the still morning air. Each steel stake came free with a satisfying jolt, and I tossed them into my truck bed like physical exhibits for a crime no one had officially acknowledged yet. When I confronted Elaine about it, caught her in her driveway while she was loading grocery bags into her spotless white SUV, she gave me an innocent routine worthy of an award. She said she had no idea what I was talking about, barely glancing up from her organic kale and artisan cheese. Maybe, she suggested, someone in the community was just trying to prevent accidents. Right. Someone in the community with access to commercial-grade signage and a precise understanding of where to place them for maximum effect. That's when Noah's Gen Z detective instincts really started paying off. The kid had mounted security cameras around the place after the tire incident. Nothing high-end, just some trail cams repositioned to cover the house and barn. What they captured was absolute gold. Clear footage of Elaine's landscaping crew planting those no hunting signs at 2:17 on a Tuesday morning. Noah cleaned up the footage on his laptop, adding timestamps and zooming in on the plates. He grinned like he'd just cracked a cold case as he told me we had her dead to rights. But Elaine was sharper than I'd initially given her credit for. When I took the evidence to the county sheriff, she had already filed her own complaint, claiming someone was harassing her landscaping crew and trespassing to set up surveillance. Her version of events painted me as an unstable neighbor, escalating a minor property disagreement into something dangerous and obsessive. Meanwhile, my legal bills were starting to soar, 15 grand and climbing, just to defend my right to live my life on my own land. Elaine's math was simple. She could spend me into surrender. The HOA's pooled legal fund versus my personal bank account, no contest. That's when I decided to commission a fresh survey. Professional grade, court ready, the whole package. It cost me another $3,000 I really didn't have. But what the surveyor turned up made every penny worth it. Elaine's perfectly aligned fence, the one that encircled her award-winning garden, actually crossed 15 feet into my property. A full quarter acre of my grandfather's land was being used for her prize roses and that ridiculous little hedge maze she loved to brag about. I stood there in the early light, hands wrapped around the new survey stakes, and couldn't help but smile. Elaine had been so busy coming after my cabin that she'd forgotten to guard her own weak spots. When I filed a formal trespassing complaint, demanding she move the fence immediately, you could practically feel her panic in the air. All that expensive landscaping, the stuff that had made the glossy magazine spreads, would have to be torn out. Her backyard showpiece was about to turn into a demolition site. That's when she made her first major misstep. She tried to buy the disputed strip at a bargain price, offered me $50,000 for land that any fair appraiser would peg at double. She urged me to think it over, told me I could use the money to relocate somewhere more suitable for my lifestyle. The stench of desperation was almost thicker than her perfume. I met her eyes and told her my lifestyle had roots here long before she arrived and would still be here long after she was gone. That was when she went nuclear. Elaine's nuclear option came bundled in a lawsuit thick enough to stop around. Intentional infliction of emotional distress, filed by some big city attorney out of Denver who specialized in HOA wars. The allegation was that my hunting was causing Elaine and her supporters severe psychological trauma and constant fear for their kids' safety. I'm not exaggerating. According to her filing, the sound of shots during lawful hunting hours was the same as living in an active combat zone. Never mind that hunting season lasts exactly 2 weeks, or that I'd never fired a round anywhere near the residential side. In Elaine's retelling, I was some deranged backwoods menace terrorizing suburbia with my dangerous lifestyle. She also moved for a restraining order to block all hunting on my property. If granted, that order would wipe out a 70-year family tradition with the stroke of a judge's pen. The local station picked up the story. When suburban living meets rural traditions, Channel 7 ran a segment that made me look like some prehistoric holdout refusing to join the modern world. Elaine, of course, gave them a polished soundbite about protecting children from hazardous activities that had no place in contemporary neighborhoods. But this is where Elaine's arrogance started backfiring. The lawsuit forced her to document every supposed incident of harassment, and Noah, being the meticulous kid he is, began lining up her claims against our security footage and my hunting logs. What we uncovered was a pattern that any prosecutor would salivate over. Elaine had been calling the cops during my lawful hunting sessions, reporting shots fired toward the subdivision when the footage clearly showed I was facing the opposite direction. She filed noise complaints when I wasn't even home. She claimed I'd acted threatening in encounters that Noah had recorded, showing me calm, respectful, and professional the entire time. The court dates turned into a 3-ring circus. Elaine showed up with a little crowd of backers, the same 5 people who'd signed her first petition, plus a handful of new faces who looked like they'd been talked into it. I came with Noah, Mrs. Green, and a growing group of neighbors who were starting to see past Elaine's act. During one particularly memorable hearing, Elaine's lawyer rolled out a binder packed with evidence. Photographs of my property snapped from her upstairs window, telephoto shots of me cleaning my rifle on my own back porch. The creepy level of her surveillance was starting to unnerve even some of her allies. That was when the dirty tricks got more intense. Anonymous tips to state wildlife officials accused me of illegally baiting deer. Fake social media profiles started circulating stories about my supposed instability and threats against neighbors. Elaine's real estate connections started leaning on other homeowners, hinting that their property values would tank if they did back the HOA's stance. The smell of burnt paper from Elaine's backyard fire pit became a nightly feature. Noah spotted it first, pointing out the acrid smoke that definitely wasn't coming from fall leaves. Someone was burning evidence, and we all knew who it had to be. Meanwhile, the stress was chewing through everything. Noah started asking if he could stay at his mom's more often because, as he put it, everything around here was getting weird. Work became my only escape from the constant legal pressure, but even there my focus was shot. It's hard to sleep when you're lying awake wondering what the next letter in the mailbox is going to threaten. The subdivision itself was splitting in 2. Some neighbors honestly felt afraid after Elaine's fear campaign. Others were getting fed up with her iron-fisted approach to everything from grass height to holiday decorations. Mrs. Green turned into my unofficial information hub, tracking which way opinions were shifting on each street. Noah's school project, though, was turning into something way bigger than either of us expected. What started out as an assignment on local government morphed into a full-blown investigation into HOA overreach. His research uncovered a pattern that stretched beyond our little corner. Elaine had been squeezing other homeowners too. The Harpers were being hammered over their non-conforming garden shed. The Dawsons got violation letters because they parked a work truck in their own driveway. Dave Morales was getting fined for his kid's basketball hoop. Elaine's idea of community standards apparently meant erasing anything that showed actual families lived in those houses. That's when Noah stumbled onto the discovery that changed everything. While digging into Elaine's background for his project, he found old newspaper pieces from her previous neighborhood in California. Same pattern, same playbook, same fallout. She'd methodically pressured owners to sell, and somehow those places always ended up getting flipped by her real estate partners at huge profits. Noah showed me the articles on his laptop, telling me she wasn't trying to improve the neighborhood. She was trying to own it. That was the twist. Elaine wasn't just hungry for compliance. She was hungry for acquisition. And my 40 acres weren't just an eyesore to her carefully curated community image. They were the centerpiece of a much bigger plan. The breakthrough arrived at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday, courtesy of Noah's insomnia and his obsession with digging through public legal databases. I found him hunched over the kitchen table, laptop open, surrounded by half-empty energy drink cans and stacks of printed documents that looked like they belonged in a law firm. "Dad," he said, voice trembling with equal parts exhaustion and excitement, "you need to see this." What he uncovered was a bombshell capable of leveling Elaine's entire operation. The Pine Ridge Estates HOA, the very weapon Elaine had used to bludgeon families into submission, had never been legally incorporated under state law. Not even close. Noah had spent hours comparing required state filings with what Elaine had submitted, and the smoking gun was right there in plain black and white. Missing signatures on county registration forms, no valid articles of incorporation, no state acknowledgement. By law, an unincorporated HOA has zero authority to issue fines, enforce covenants, collect dues, or do anything beyond hosting a neighborhood barbecue. The realization hit at me like a runaway truck. Elaine had been collecting dues from 47 families for 4 years without a shred of legal standing to do so. That added up to over $200,000 in payments with no legitimate accounting, no oversight, and not even the thin veneer of legality. The printer hummed in the quiet kitchen as we made copies of everything, each document sliding out like another nail in Elaine's coffin. Noah, fueled by his detective streak, had practically turned himself into a forensic accountant overnight. He traced payments, flagged discrepancies, and built a timeline showing exactly how Elaine siphoned money from an HOA that technically didn't even exist. But the real shock arrived the next morning when Mrs. Green showed up carrying a weathered manila envelope she'd been holding onto for just the right moment. Inside were documents that painted a picture even darker than we'd imagined. Elaine's real estate agency had been quietly representing developers planning a massive shopping center on the far edge of the county. "She came to see me about 3 months ago," Mrs. Green said, hands shaking slightly as she accepted the coffee I poured her. "Asked if I'd consider selling. Told me property values were about to shift in a big way." She'd been planting seeds. The pieces started sliding together like they'd been waiting for someone to notice the pattern. Noah's research pointed us straight to the real prize. My land wasn't just scenic and historical. My family's 40 acres held something priceless: water rights. Water rights old enough, rare enough, and valuable enough to make developers drool. In drought-prone Colorado, these rights weren't just important. They were worth more than the land itself. "Dad," Noah said, eyes wide and bright behind his glasses, "Elaine's developers need our water rights to make their whole project work. Without them, they can't build anything." The implications hit me like a lightning strike. I didn't need to stop the development. I needed to control it. Dave Morales filled in the missing pieces with the experience of someone who'd spent his life in construction. Any major development would require new access roads that could only pass through my property. My cooperation wasn't optional. It was mandatory. Noah, Mrs. Green, and Dave were unraveling Elaine's entire scheme in real time. That's when Sarah Chen, my attorney, sharp-eyed, sharp-witted, and absolutely fearless, laid out our strategy with the precision of a surgeon. We were going to hit Elaine on every legal front at the same time: criminal referral for theft, civil lawsuit for damages, injunction to freeze all HOA assets, Public records request for every dollar ever paid into her sham organization. And once the court sees she was never legally incorporated, Sarah said, tapping the documents with the back of her pen, every fine, every notice, every cent she took becomes void and recoverable. The next phase was rallying the neighborhood. We hosted a community truth session, nothing fancy, just a bonfire behind the old cabin, a massive pot of strong coffee, and enough open space for anyone who wanted to show up. 32 neighbors came, 32 people who'd been quietly living under Elaine's thumb. As folks settled into camp chairs and logs around the fire, you could feel something shifting in the air, a shared sense that maybe, just maybe, they weren't powerless after all. Mrs. Green presented the historical timeline with the calm authority of someone who'd lived it. Maria Hernandez, the neighborhood CPA, explained the financial discrepancies in plain language. Dave talked construction. Sarah laid out everyone's rights, and Noah, my brilliant kid, delivered a digital presentation that broke down Elaine's fraud so clearly even a jury of middle schoolers could have followed it. But the moment that set everything in motion came when Dave stood, firelight reflecting off his weathered face, and said exactly what everyone had been thinking. Elaine messed with the wrong group of people. Noah had an idea for getting the truth out. Social media, interviews, complete transparency. Dad, he said, practically bouncing with adrenaline, the best way to beat a bully is to pull back the curtain and show people who they really are. And he was right. Elaine's polished facade was starting to crumble, and she could feel it. Within days, she was calling neighbors, begging for their loyalty, offering bribes disguised as settlements, spinning wild stories about conspiracies against her. But it was too late. The cracks in her empire were spreading faster than she could patch them. Her final play, trying to rush the developer deal to cash out before her schemes got exposed, was already 3 moves behind us. She didn't know it yet, but her downfall had already begun. Elaine's desperation started showing in ways that would have been laughable if they weren't so dangerous. The morning after our community meeting, she marched up to my porch at 6 sharp, carrying a sleek, black briefcase like some character out of a crime drama. When she snapped it open, bundles of $100 bills were stacked inside, rubber-banded and neatly arranged. $100,000 in cash. "Take it and sign the settlement," she said, her perfectly groomed exterior cracking just enough to reveal the predator underneath. Everyone walks away happy. I stood there in my work boots, coffee steaming in my hand, staring at enough money to buy a brand new truck and then some. And sure, for a split second, it tempted me. But then I heard Noah's voice in my head, his anger, his hurt, his determination. And I remembered exactly who she'd hurt and why we were fighting in the first place. "Elaine," I said, setting my mug on the porch railing, "you don't get to buy your way out of crimes." Her expression shattered like thin ice. "You don't know who you're dealing with, Carter," she snapped, voice trembling with outrage. "I have connections. I have influence. I can make your life very, very difficult." And boy, did she try. The sabotage escalated from petty vandalism to attacks that could only be called malicious. My well, the same well that had provided clean water to 3 generations of Carters, was suddenly contaminated with diesel fuel. Testing showed it wasn't accidental runoff. Someone had deliberately poured petroleum down the casing. My hunting gear started disappearing from the barn. Not just the expensive stuff, my rifle scope, calls, but sentimental things too, like my grandfather's old hunting knife that had been passed down through the family. Every theft was small enough to be brushed off individually, but together they sent a clear message. Elaine wanted me scared. She wanted me cornered. Noah's cameras began catching nighttime visitors creeping around the cabin, specifically Elaine's landscaping crew trying way too hard to act covert. The crunch of footsteps outside at 2 in the morning became a regular occurrence, like having a pack of amateurs attempting espionage in my backyard. But Elaine made her biggest mistake when she dragged local politics into the fight. She'd spent years nurturing relationships with the city council, and now she called in those favors. Suddenly, I was bombarded with inspections, reviews, and evaluations from every department imaginable. The building inspector acted like my 70-year-old cabin was a condemned chemical plant. Every board, nail, and wire was scrutinized with a level of intensity usually reserved for rocket launches. Then came code enforcement, citing me for my truck being 6 inches past a boundary line, for using my chainsaw at 11 on a Saturday morning, for stacking firewood in a way she claimed clashed with aesthetic harmony. Even the inspector looked embarrassed delivering that one. Elaine's usual confident composure began to warp under the strain. Her meticulously maintained appearance started cracking. Her walk more frantic, her eyes sharper and jittery, her temper shorter. But instead of backing off, she just doubled down. A whisper campaign spread through the subdivision, turning me into some mythical menace. Anonymous accounts online accused me of a dangerous past. Fake reviews popped up claiming I was unstable at work. Elaine even called my supervisor, spinning lies about my erratic behavior and warning I shouldn't be trusted with heavy equipment. She whispered at PTA meetings, grocery stores, community events, painting me as a threat. But Noah was tracking everything, every fake account, every anonymous rumor, every digital trail leading right back to Elaine's home office. Meanwhile, the private investigator I'd hired, a former Denver cop named Rodriguez, gathered evidence of his own. He recorded Elaine's attempted bribe on audio and video so clear that a courtroom wouldn't need subtitles. Offering cash to silence criminal charges? That's obstruction of justice, and she just added it to her growing list. And she didn't stop with us. She tried to break the people helping me. Mrs. Green began receiving anonymous calls warning her that accidents happen to elderly folks who don't mind their business. Dave's contractor license was suddenly under review. Maria, our CPA ally, got hit with a surprise IRS audit, one conducted by an agent who just happened to be the brother-in-law of Elaine's real estate buddy. Elaine wasn't just fighting me anymore. She was waging war on everyone who dared stand with me. But that was her second fatal mistake, because she had underestimated how much the neighborhood already hated her tyranny. For years, people had swallowed their anger, playing along to keep the peace. Now, finally, they had a reason and a leader to push back. Her last desperate move came wrapped in drama. She called an emergency HOA meeting, pitching it as a community crisis session, her chance to retake control. The invitation, hand-delivered to every doorstep, was loaded with emotional buzzwords about safety, harmony, and protecting the neighborhood. When the meeting started, she rolled out a presentation that could have won an award in manipulation. She projected photos of my cabin taken with long-range lenses, making it look derelict and dangerous. She threw around half-truths, invented statistics, and dramatic testimonies from families she'd clearly pressured. She even produced letters of support from city officials she'd long been grooming. But the cracks in her facade showed. Her hair was slightly out of place, her smile strained, her eyes wild. She looked like someone clinging to power by her fingernails. And then she made the mistake that ended everything. She accused me of threatening neighbors, intimidating families, and behaving violently. Claims Noah had filmed and disproved over and over. The room fell silent, not with agreement, but with disbelief. And then to her horror, someone stood up. Mrs. Green, quiet, gentle, 78-year-old Mrs. Green, rose from her chair like a queen reclaiming her throne. Elaine, she said, her voice clear and strong, I have lived here longer than anyone in this room, and I have never seen such dishonesty as what you just presented. That was the moment the dam broke. One by one, neighbors stood and revealed Elaine's threats, bribes, manipulation, and blackmail. Dave announced she'd offered him $50,000 to lie in court. When he refused, she threatened his license. Maria detailed the financial irregularities. Families described harassment so relentless, it had driven some to consider moving. Elaine tried to shut it down, shouting that everyone was conspiring against her. But then Noah quietly connected his laptop to the projector, and he played the deleted emails. Elaine's emails, recovered from server archives, printed, dated, irreversible. Emails detailing her entire scheme, pressuring families to sell, coordinating property flips with developers, forging compliance votes, calculating profits. The final slide? A financial projection showing her personal cut from forcing me off my land, $3,200,000. Elaine's face drained to chalk white, and that's when the sirens outside began growing louder. Detective Rodriguez had been waiting. Detective Rodriguez stepped through the back doors of the Pine Ridge Community Center just as Elaine was shouting about conspiracies and forged evidence. The click of his badge against the metal doorframe sliced through her hysteria like a knife. Two uniformed officers followed him, along with a stern-looking representative from the district attorney's office, a woman who'd quietly been building a criminal case against Elaine for weeks. The room fell silent, utterly, completely silent. Rodriguez walked down the center aisle, warrant in hand, every step echoing in the stunned quiet. Channel 7's camera crew tracked him the whole way, broadcasting every heartbeat of what was about to unfold. "Elaine Stafford," he announced, voice firm and steady, "you're under arrest for fraud, theft, filing false police reports, and conspiracy to commit real estate fraud." Elaine's face cycled through half a dozen shades, white, gray, green, before settling into a sickly color that made her look like she might faint. Her carefully crafted persona crumbled in front of the entire neighborhood. "This is a setup," she screeched, backing away as the officers stepped toward her. "This is harassment. You're all being manipulated. You don't know what you're doing." But no one moved to defend her. No one even looked conflicted. After years of torment, the community witnessed justice happening right in front of them. And then something no one could have planned happened. People stood, one row then another, until nearly every person in that room was applauding as the officers cuffed Elaine's wrists. The sound echoed off the walls like thunder. The woman who'd strutted through the neighborhood like a self-appointed queen was now being walked out by law enforcement, while cameras captured every step. Tyler didn't need to film it. Channel 7 had it covered, but he still raised his phone, documenting the moment for posterity. Outside, the media frenzy exploded. Reporters swarmed, lights flashed, microphones were shoved toward Elaine as she was escorted to the patrol car. Channel 7's Jessica Martinez fired off questions about the fraud, the money, the pressure tactics, the forged documents. But Elaine only covered her face and muttered about getting the best lawyers money can buy. Noah seized the moment. A reporter passed him the mic, and he spoke with a steady confidence that stunned even me. "My dad taught me that sometimes you have to stand up to bullies," he said. "Elaine thought she could steal our land and scare us into silence. She underestimated the wrong family." When the reporter turned to me, I kept it simple. "This was never about property values or hunting," I said into the camera. "This was about one woman's greed in a community she tried to tear apart." Behind us, people were chanting. Actually chanting. "Justice for Lucas!" Mrs. Green was wiping tears. Dave was shaking hands with neighbors he barely knew. Maria was already talking about launching a legitimate HOA with real transparency, but the moment that hit me hardest was when Noah stepped beside me, slinging his arm across my shoulders as we watched the patrol car roll away. "Dad," he murmured, smiling through exhaustion. "Granddad would be proud." That night's news lit up the whole state. "Local woman arrested in multi-million-dollar HOA fraud scheme" blared across every station. By morning, the story had gone viral. Clips of Elaine's meltdown and arrest spread across social media. #HO Hustler, #Justice for Lucas, and #Stop Stafford started trending. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. 6 months later, the fallout was complete. Elaine's house sold at auction for half its original value. Nobody wanted to buy the home of a convicted felon with 2 years of probation, $100,000 in fines, and enough community service to keep her scrubbing graffiti until retirement. Her real estate license? Revoked permanently. Her developer buddies? Unavailable for comment. Last anyone heard, she slunk back to California, probably telling horror stories about unreasonable mountain people who don't appreciate good leadership. Meanwhile, Pine Ridge Estates healed faster than anyone expected. Mrs. Green became the first president of our properly incorporated HOA. Turns out, when you actually follow the law, file the paperwork, and treat people like humans, property values rise, by 15% to be exact. Dave's construction company got hired to complete neighborhood improvements that weren't vanity projects, real, useful upgrades like proper drainage and a community walking trail. Funny what a functional neighborhood can do. Noah and I grew closer than ever. He'd gone from weekend visitor to my partner in preserving our legacy. His meticulous documentation and digital investigation earned him a scholarship to Colorado State's journalism program. Apparently, exposing a real estate crime ring makes for an impressive application essay. As for the land, The developers reached out again, this time honestly. And instead of just selling, we negotiated a deal that preserved the hunting grounds and benefited the community. The Carter Conservation Fund was born, a trust that supports youth hunting safety courses, environmental programs, and scholarships for rural students. Noah's Eagle Scout project, creating an educational trail through our preserve, became a statewide model. The old cabin was restored and designated a historical landmark. Its walls, lined with photos of 3 generations, now stand beside new ones of Noah and me, continuing the tradition. Every fall, our annual Carter Heritage Hunt Weekend brings families from across Colorado. Kids learn archery and tracking, parents connect, and everyone shares stories about standing up to bullies. But the best moment came one quiet Sunday evening. Noah and I were sitting together on the cabin porch, sunset washing the mountains in golden violet, when he turned to me and said softly, "We didn't just save the land, Dad. We built something better." And he was right. Elaine's attempt to destroy our legacy had backfired spectacularly. We didn't just win, we grew. Our property now bears a new sign, Carter Heritage Land Hunting and Community Welcome. And beneath it, Noah hung a smaller plaque. In honor of bullies everywhere, may they always lose. So here's my message to anyone trapped in their own HOA nightmare. Document everything, know your rights, and don't ever let petty tyrants convince you that their corruption is normal. And remember, sometimes beating the bully isn't the real victory. Sometimes the real win is building something better for everyone. If you've got your own HOA horror story, drop it in the comments. And if this story helped you understand your rights or gave you hope, hit that subscribe button. We're just getting started.